Hello, everybody, and welcome to a first of a three-part webinar series from NEEF titled Nature for All, Engaging Underrepresented Communities in the Outdoors. Today, we have guests from Corazón Latino to learn more about engaging Spanish-speaking communities in the outdoors. Before we start, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Nick Bradford, Program Director of Research and Innovation at NEEF. We are located in Washington, D.C., the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Nacotchtank and Piscataway peoples, and my pronouns are he/him. For today's agenda, we'll start with an introduction to NEEF, and then we'll give an overview of the National Public Lands Day, and then we'll have a presentation by Corazón Latino's Felipe Benitez, and then a question and answer at the end. NEEF, or the National Environmental Education Foundation, is a leader in lifelong learning. We were congressionally chartered in 1990 as a 501c3 nonprofit complement to the Environmental Protection Agency. We are nonpartisan and non-advocacy. We are charged with advancing environmental literacy nationwide, and we facilitate public-private partnerships in support of environmental education. Our purpose is to cultivate an environmentally conscious and responsible public with a vision that people's everyday actions are guided by an understanding and concern for the well-being of people and the planet. And our mission is to make the environment more accessible, relatable, relevant, and connected to the daily lives of all Americans. And right there, rooted in our mission, is our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion for all Americans. Both our DEI goals are internal and external. Internally, we maintain a diverse workforce and a work culture that is based on inclusion, equity, and respect. Externally, we create opportunities for people with varied perspectives and identities to experience and learn about the environment in ways that improve their lives and the health of the planet. We do this by listening and understanding, by holding listening sessions with our audience and partners to understand needs, conducting DEI and culture surveys to chart our progress, and ensuring equity in all our programs and our grant making by establishing baselines and goals per community. And by including and understanding, we highlight voices of communities of color in our programs and communications. We provide funding for grantee projects that increase diversity and inclusion, and expanding our existing work that affects underrepresented communities. Our three pillars here at NEEF are K-12 environmental education, public lands engagement, and health and wellness. Today we'll be focusing on our public lands engagement, which are programs, events, and grant-making activities that encourage people to visit public lands of all types and sizes. Now, our biggest event here at NEEF is National Public Lands Day, this year taking place on September 25th with the theme of More Ways to Connect to Nature. National Public Lands Day is the largest single-day volunteer event for America's public lands. Each year, hundreds of thousands of volunteers come together on the fourth Saturday into September to participate in various projects designed to restore and enhance public parks, forests, waterways, and more. It's also a fee-free entrance day for national parks and other federally managed public lands, so you can visit all public parks, national parks for free. Here is an example of the impact that NPLD has. These are from 2019, where we saw over 156,000 volunteers, over 624,000 volunteer hours that contributed to an estimated $15.9 million of volunteer work. And these took place in 2,117 sites across the country. This year's National Public Lands Day theme is More Ways to Connect to Nature. And taking into consideration that social distancing requirements may still be in place for much of the country, this September, we allow participants to choose between in-person and virtual NPLD events. The goal of this year's NPLD is to highlight diversity, whether it's in the public lands that host events, in the people that participate, and in the types of activities that we offer during this year's celebration. NPLD provides all lovers of the outdoors, old and new, an opportunity to show their appreciation by giving back to these unique places. I encourage you to learn more about NPLD at neefusa.org/NPLD, where you can also find events that you can participate in or register your own NPLD event. Here's an example of the need to increase diversity on public lands. This is a stat from a 2021 Outdoor Participation Trends Report from the Outdoor Industry Association. I found that in 2020, there was 53% of all Americans participated in at least one outdoor recreation activity, the highest on record. Despite the pandemic, 7.1 million more Americans participated in outdoor recreation in 2020 than in 2019. And yet, nearly 75% of all outdoor participants identified as white. Participation rates declined 7% annually among Asian Americans for the past 3 years, stagnated among the Black community, and grew among Hispanics, but remained well below whites. And so now to learn more about how we can engage Spanish-speaking communities in the outdoors, we have our guest speaker, Felipe Benitez, who is the executive director and founder of Corazón Latino. Felipe has more than 15 years of experience designing and implementing strategic communication programs to enhance and protect the reputations of organizations, governments, companies, and brands. Through his prior work with leading organizations like United Way Worldwide, Fenton Communications, and Ogilvy Public Relations, Benitez has designed and implemented communications and outreach strategies for advocacy campaigns worldwide, from protecting the fundamental rights of indigenous groups in the Amazon to fighting climate change to immigrants in the United States. And now I'll hand it over to Felipe.
Thank you very much, Nick. Let me do my screen share so I can get you out of that duty. Give me 1 second. Continue. I think we have it. Perfect. I think it's working. Can anybody just give me a
Yep, we can see it now.
Fantastic. Thank you, Nick, for your kind introduction. But I like keeping our partners on their toes, keep them moving. We told them, hey, it's gonna be me. But I broke a little bit the rules, and I asked a dear colleague, a friend, an inspiration, my dear good friend Cam Juarez, to join me in this conversation. This slideshow is we presented some iterations together, and I thought it was important to do it because Cam brings a very unique perspective as part of the National Park Service, as a park ranger, but also as a leader within the Latino community. So I will let Cam introduce himself. Cam, bienvenido.
Hi everyone, can you guys hear me okay? My video seems to not be working.
We can hear you, but go ahead.
Excellent. I'm gonna go ahead and just stop video here and just see if I can increase my my broadband over here. So my name is Cam Juarez. As Felipe mentioned, I am a park ranger here at Saguaro National Park in Tucson, Arizona. I am the community engagement and outreach coordinator for the park, and I serve also as a backup public information officer, and I serve on the park's leadership team. I was fortunate to be invited to be part of this back in 2015 and was recruited to join the Park Service in 2016 for the National Park Service Centennial. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that today is the National Park Service 105th birthday. So happy birthday to the Park Service and everyone who loves national parks.
Great, thank you, Cam. So we're gonna get started, and you will hear more about Cam's experience, but Cam and I, with Corazón Latino and various other initiatives, we've been working diligently, at least for a year and a half, on meaningfully engaging Latino communities, Spanish-speaking communities in the Tucson area with Saguaro National Park, but also for other initiatives, including right now we're implementing a COVID vaccination outreach campaign, and we use the expertise, the trust that our communities have on Corazón Latino and leaders like Cam in really bringing the importance of of vaccination. So what we are doing is really trying to serve our communities in a way that obviously it's pillar, it's nature, it's our public lands, is being good stewards of the land, but we also want to make sure that it's not an isolated or a thing that can be siloed. It's part of public health, food security, housing, economic stability, education. It's all interconnected. So we try to make sure that our programming, our offering, and the reason Corazón Latino is there for the community is to serve all the needs, or at least try to serve some of the needs of the Latino community. Very briefly, our organization has presence in the East Coast, in the Southwest, in Puerto Rico. On and off, we have either representatives or staff in almost 20 states. In some places, we have a much more robust presence, like in Arizona, like the DC area, Maryland, Virginia. But what we try to create is models of engagement that really can be replicated and that can be scaled. We were born out of a seed grant from the Forest Service 4 years ago, in which we established an opportunity to create opportunities for engagement for Latino communities or Spanish-speaking communities in the DC area to engage them in forest health protection. And from there, we started to grow almost in an exponential way. And we are very proud of all the work and the impact that Corazón Latino has. So I want to start with a few basic concepts. And this webinar is intended to give you some practical advice, some practical, almost like a checklist of things that you may want to start thinking if you are thinking, or if you are already engaging Spanish speaking or members of the Latino community. But again, there's a baseline that we want to make sure that it is at least known and understood, because all the recommendations that Cam and I will give you are based on this. So the first and most important from my perspective is that Latino communities and communities of color enjoy nature in different ways. There's no right or wrong way to enjoy nature. There's just different ways. The picture on the left might be stereotypical, or the mainstream or marketing, however you want to call it. It's like the expectations of nature. But the picture on the right, it's also a way human beings, communities, members of this beautiful country enjoy nature, enjoy our public lands. So we need to be welcoming, we need to be ready, and we need to be conscious of these differences. And we need to make sure, as it was mentioned before, that we provide access, because it is mandated by law that we provide access, that we are welcoming to every person in this country. So we need to make sure that we take in considerations those differences. So when you're planning your National Public Lands Day event, the same way you are planning for the person on the left, make sure that you're planning for the person on the right, or the group on the right, because that's what will make a successful engagement and what it come as stewardship of the land. Cam, I know you want to say something.
Sure, I would say that something that's super important to consider is the concept of assimilation and acculturation. Acculturation is defined as, it's a two-way street. We are preparing for those visits from the quote-unquote non-traditional visitor or the underrepresented visitor. But the visitor is also acculturating to how these spaces are traditionally used. So there's a learning process going back and forth. The assimilation process ultimately becomes where some of the folks on the right side would navigate more towards the left side. I know that that's occurred in my family and a lot of families that I know, but it doesn't always occur. And so it's important to consider that the assimilation and acculturation are part of the institutional change that we as public land.
Cam, is there any chance you can get a better connection or try to call in, because we're getting messages that it's hard to the connection is a little bit choppy. Do you mind trying if not we'll.
Yeah, I can definitely do that. Can you hear me a little better now?
I will continue, and as you come back, but uh, just to for those who were not able to listen properly what Cam was saying, it's an important element to consider its level of acculturation, of assimilation. If we're talking about recent immigrants, if we're talking about second, third, fourth generation, there's considerations that are important on how to prepare, how to create programming that it's appropriate, how to, and we'll give you some ideas here, but that was Cam's point. Another important element that we emphasize for all of the agencies that we work for, that we partner with, such as the Park Service, the Forest Service, Fish and Wildlife, and other nonprofits, that translations are not enough. And here's a very extreme example of probably an early Google Translate translation of some safety messages. Basically, it's extreme caution, watch for eyes. And for those who speak Spanish, may see that it's a terrible translation. It's el reloj extremo del cuidado para el hielo, which roughly translates the clock extreme for care for the eyes. Makes no sense. And this is a safety sign that it's located somewhere at the public land, or at least was. So just because you put out something or you do a Google Translate, that doesn't mean that it's gonna resonate with members of the Spanish-speaking community. And this is a very evident, which is just a sign, but when you're organizing an event, and if the assumption is that because you put out a flyer in Spanish language, or if you invite members of the Latino community, that's just gonna work and it's gonna translate directly. No, what we need and what we aim for, and we call it a transcreation. It's really creating an event, a sign, a tweet, a flyer that it's culturally relevant to the community and linguistically appropriate, meaning that it speaks to the community in cultural, we'll talk a little bit about the various authentic cultural considerations, but also it's if you're going to do it in the language, you want to make sure that it's that the same standards that you will use in an English language material, apply them to Spanish language. So we want to make sure that even though we've seen very well-intentioned efforts by site managers, by organizations, like, oh, we'll just do a Google Translate and put it out, or like we'll do, it's not enough. It is a good first step and we commend it, but to do it right, there has to be a process in which we are thoughtful, in which we're thinking, and again, part of starting the process of reaching communities with limited English proficiency, or with it, it's, are we ready? Are we prepared? Do we have the infrastructure? Do we have the human capital to be able to accommodate all the needs, from content creation to at the event? Are we able to provide instructions in a different language? All of those considerations need to come into place when designing. There's common ground. Don't get too complicated. Like we're talking about, there's if we're talking about the Latino community, or Latinx, or Hispanic, doesn't matter the term that you prefer. It's not a monolith, and we learned it even recently at the at least on a national, it became very evident that during the election that the Latino community is not a monolith, that there's difference between Mexicans or Arizonans with Mexican descent in obviously in the Southwest versus Puerto Ricans in New York, or in Florida. So we're talking about around 17 countries plus Spain, plus Brazil, if you want to consider, which may consider Latinos. So there's different nationalities, different ways of speaking Spanish, different ways of even connecting with nature. I mean, but at the end of the day, there's common ground, and there's language, there's cultural similarities. Latino communities, as other communities of color, are family oriented. This is obviously not exclusive. Pursuit of happiness, we always call it. Music arts, dance, and fiesta. This might sound cliche. This might sound a stereotype, but it works. And we'll show you how we do, like incorporating the human community family element will make your events, your efforts in a much more compelling way for our communities. Just some rules of thumbs. If your community is comprised with mostly recent arrivals, probably it's preferable to talk in Spanish or to create content that it's in Spanish. First generations, English, Spanish, or Spanglish. Second generations, English predominantly and Spanglish. But that doesn't mean that you should not use content that is culturally relevant. Thank you very much. And by the way, the same way you were asking comments about Cam's uh, technical difficulties, feel free to write any comments, any reactions. For me, it's very important because it gives us little feedback and don't wait until the end. If you have any pressing questions or comment, please go ahead and Nick or Tara will read it out loud. They have my authorization to interrupt. So if there's anything present, please, by all means. So when we are talking about the type of messaging, the type of imagery that will resonate with Latino communities, and this is not only for Latino communities, but literally with human beings, we like to provide some guidance. And first of all, public lands, conservation, National Public Lands Day. Yes, we are serving our Mother Earth, we're serving nature, but at the end of the day, we are also creating a reciprocity relation. If we take care of nature, nature will take care of us. So make these issues human. It's important to have a good picture of the place that we're intending to serve, but it's also important to show faces, show the human element. And there's research conducted by a guide called Hardwired to Love the Ocean, partially funded by the Packard Foundation. If you want to Google it, and we can share the link here. It's a really, really interesting and really, really practical guide on how to make sure that you're communicating issues around conservation, around public lands, in this case, oceans, but it translates really well with any public land. And again, talk about emotions, values, beliefs, and show, don't tell. What's very important for us. You can write a paragraph, but a good picture will tell the story, and especially in the type of work that we do. Cam, do you have a better connection?
I hope so. Can you hear me okay?
Want to ask the crowd?
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I think it's much better.
All right, I'm gonna keep my camera off.
Perfect. All right, I'm gonna continue, and then I'm gonna ask Cam to intervene in other slides. Some mind frames, when we're talking about public lands, frames or mindsets that resonate with Latino communities. Here's some that are provided, but what we've encountered that are really good to connect in an emotional manner, and to really inspire opportunities for volunteerism is caring for God's beautiful creation, caring for this gift that we have from God, however you wanna call it. Family traditions. Do you remember when you were back in your home country, or your ancestors or your family? Remember that, or start creating new ones, new family traditions in the country that you're making your own, where the country where you're raising your kids. So those are frames that work really well. And again, if you want to learn more about them, download this Hardwired to Love the Ocean. It's really an amazing guide for those who do communication. The model that we follow, and as I was mentioning at the beginning, whether it's in Arizona, Puerto Rico, Washington, D.C., we even have some international work in Panama, is we tried to bring 3 pillars of interaction with the community. One is the grassroots. One is actually getting our hands dirty. Okay, what kind of event we can do? How can we get them to really make that physical, hands-on connection with our public lands? Digital strategies, the way to communicate with our communities and with youth through your phone. So how can we create a Facebook, an Instagram, text message effort to really convey, invite, and then reinforce the work that we're doing within our public lands? And then the third pillar is traditional media. Univision, Telemundo, other sources of Be Latino, those are always good ways to also reconnect. So when we are sharing a message, when we are inviting somebody to participate in national public lands, if we have these three elements, at least from our experience and the model that we apply, works really, really well. Cam, do you have any thoughts on this?
Absolutely. We've been pretty successful with engaging radio shows. But the other thing that we've come across is the understanding that here in the borderlands, while we do want to provide imagery that is engaging of those communities, we also want to make sure that we have a bilingual meetings, whatever we put out in Spanish, we want to help put out in English as well. Because while the population is largely Latino, a lot of folks still speak or prefer to speak English. So that's something to consider. And I would say regarding the grassroots activities, it's important to recognize that people want to feel like they're part of the process, not just visiting. So the more interactivity, the more opportunities to provide some level of service, you're going to help make that connection, as you were saying.
Thank you, Cam. Post-tech, I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing Cam. That's also for others, or are we good? I just want to make sure. So I also don't want to have Cam speak and not be listen. So just let us know, and if you have any comments or questions, please.
I will begin including some of those statements in the chat as well.
Yeah, please do that, because it sounds muffled, and I just think that it's and since we're recording, want to make sure that it's quality. So sorry, Cam. Just put your comments and we'll try to do a future one with when if we are able to get a better. Sorry, I apologize for that, Cam, and not everybody. So another elements of how do we bring, and because a big question always happens of like, okay, how do we start engaging with communities? So how do we put out an ad? Do we bring do we go to schools? What is the best way? It's always a big question. Where do we start? Where can site managers, how can organizations start connecting with communities? So our first and most important recommendation is start with organizations that are already serving the community. Go to the library, go to the healthcare clinic, go to the organization that's provided immigration services or financial education. There's always organization, or even like the consulate of Mexico or any Latin American countries, or even the restaurant or the tiendita, the store, the convenience store. There's always, especially in those sites where there's a heavy Latino or an important Latino presence, there's always those members who start there. Develop relations, go talk to them. Usually interacting with public lands, conservation, environmental, EJ, whatever it is, it's always something that these organizations that already have the trust of the community will add on to their scope of services. So if you're talking about businesses, churches, schools, they will happily integrate, and they will find, because sometimes it's because of lack of information or because they don't know how to approach the management of a public land or whatever. There's always that opportunity. But when you do that, it's important to know that it's going to be an investment of time and resources, and not talking necessarily money. But to be able to develop a meaningful relationship, let's say with a church group or with a community-based organization, you need to be there. You need to have conversations. You need to have to be patient. You need to test. The beauty is that since they already have the trust of the community, it's easier to ask them, hey, why don't we organize an event and maybe we provide transportation or whatever it is that we do to make sure that they attend, and then create a program that it's adequate, that it's meaningful, and that's welcoming to those communities. So those are basic. Like, first, start where those places that there's that trust already exists. Be there for your community, not only National Public Lands Day or whenever you need them. Be there when they need you. So here's two examples of our work during the pandemic. The picture on the left, it's in Puerto Rico. Obviously, as many of you, we couldn't do any events outdoors or in person. So since we are part of the USDA family through the Forest Service, we were asked to support, to see how we can provide some assistance in the distribution of food boxes that the USDA through the CARES Act was approved. So we used our network, we use the people that we work for community engagement for the Yunque National Forest to create this network of food boxes distribution. So yes, it was a year that we may not be able to invite you to the Yunque, but here we are here in a moment. So I mean, this is just an example, but there's other opportunities. The picture on the right is a tree planting, a ceremonial tree planting that we facilitated in Michigan, and the young lady planting the tree is Breonna Taylor's niece. So again, in a moment where there was the healing needed to happen, we try to bring nature into that healing process. So it's always a same thing. It's reciprocity. Find ways and be there. Not avoid the like, again, transactional. Even if there's an exchange of resources or passes or whatever, don't just do it once and then think about them next year. No, be consistent, because that's how you're going to build meaningful long-term relationships. Event planning. So, okay, we have NPLD as a target date. How do we create a meaningful event for Latino communities? We're going to give you our best thinking, our best recommendations. Again, this is something that Cam and I and many other professionals and colleagues that have worked put together, trying to summarize all the different. Obviously, there's much more considerations, but here's at least a few that can get you started. Well, the first and most important, remove barriers of entry. What are those elements or those circumstances that are preventing the communities, Latino communities, to go to your event or to access your public land? Is it cost? Does your park or land has, even if it's a minimal cost, $5, $3, whatever it is, or if you multiply that by a family of five, and maybe the head of the family is making minimum wage, it adds up. Timing, transport. At what time are you expecting? At what time are you organizing your events? Transportation, equipment, information, and communication. I'm not going to go in deep in each one of those. So just mentioning it again. A family of 3 or 5 members. If your event, obviously NPLD is free for all, but when we are organizing, let's have a small fee or something to pay for minimum, it adds up. So cost is a consideration. And I know Cam has created a lot of very interesting ways to provide free access, even at certain events, not necessarily when it's a free for all day, special permitting. So there's always an opportunity. So when you're thinking, especially when you're trying to bring folks that are usually not taking part or not enjoying your particular public land, make sure that that cost is a super important consideration. Transportation, is your site close by accessible through public transportation? Is carpooling available? Do you actually need to create some alternative like a shuttle bus or any other, or just provide information or maybe somebody to walk them through that? We actually a few weeks ago for the Latino Conservation Week, we organized an event at Rock Creek Park in Washington, D.C. for those who know the area. It was the reopening, or at least the soft reopening of the visitor center at Rock Creek Park after pandemic and some remodeling that happened. So we wanted to really encourage the participation of Latino communities. So near Rock Creek Park, there's a large faith-based community, a large church where a large number of Latino members of the community go. So we went 4 weeks in advance. We talked to the priest, to the person in charge of Latino outreach, and we say, hey, we're gonna have this event. It's free. We want your community, our community, to join. So the first thing is like, that's great. We might need some transportation. Is there a chance to put a bus? Like, okay, but we need to fill it. If we put if we give you a 30, we need 30 people there. We're gonna invest. So then they went all of the logistics of one in Sunday church, make the announcement 2 weeks in advance, the day of, making sure that they were giving information and then providing information about what's going to happen. So transportation is a very important consideration. Timing. Again, at least for example, in the DC area, where a majority of the members of the Latino community work on Saturdays because it's working in service or restaurant industry, Saturday it's a work day. So organizing something for National Public Lands Day on a Saturday morning might not be the best strategy. In Arizona, it's different. There's a mix, but it might work, especially it's going to be heat season. So you might want to do something very early, like Cam would mention, or Cam would probably say. So in our experience, where there's this consideration that Saturday is a bad day, we usually always try to do it Sunday. After the later in the day, the better. So after church time, it's better. But if you do that, then you need to expect that people are coming after church, dressed in church clothes, and attend your event. So what is the right timing? And it might be different for each one, for each region. Puerto Rico, for example, it does work on the Saturday mornings. Each community, it has some particularities, and sometimes you just need to test. Sometimes you just need to have conversation and ask for those members, those leaders like Cam, say like, hey, what do you think? Or as I was mentioning, those community organizations that are serving the community, when do you think it's a good time? And they probably will give you some insights. So every time you're creating, that you're thinking about an event, I will emphasize in co-create. Ask those who are in contact, that have the trust of the community, to help guide you. It's the right time, it's the right angle, it's the right messaging, it's the right mix of activities. So all of that matter to make sure that you have a successful event. Equipment. There's as I was mentioning, expect the whole family. Expect that everybody, that everywhere from the little ones to the abuelitos will show up. So you need to make sure that you have activities, that you have activities and resources to welcome everybody. So want to make sure that if somebody, like, you'll have teenagers that may want to do hiking, but you may need something very basic or very simple for older adults. So make sure that you're thinking through that you are offering something for everybody, and plan activities for depending on age, physical activity, level of comfort in the outdoors. Some folks might not be as keen or as feel as adventurous as others on doing something outdoors. Language, culture. So make sure that you're thinking and considering all those elements when designing the actual run of show, the actual activities that you're going to do in your event. Provide information in advance, and this is something that Cam always emphasizes. Know before you go. What do you need to bring? What kind of clothes? schedule of activities. How do you get there? Cam always puts a really good example of in Saguaro National Park. There's two sides of the park. So it inevitably, when you say inside A, they go to the other one, and vice versa. So provide explicit and very concrete explanations of what they knew, what they did to do, and you can do that in the flyer. You can open a phone line, like have a hotline, somebody to respond that in social media. I mean, provide as much information in advance as possible, information about food, about amenities at the event, because those are questions that when a mom or una mamá, un papá, un abuelito, if they're deciding to go or not, those are things that will happen. They will not assume that everything is taken care of. They will be thinking of all those things. We often get calls, or we often get questions like, can I bring my 2-year-old? Can I bring my mom, because we're coming after church? So make sure that you provide as much information as needed. And then then comes the fun part. What kind of activities can you implement? So here's just a list of the things that as Corazón Latino we have in our portfolio of activities for any given day. So the picture on the right shows you some kids doing citizen science, using an app from the Forest Service to measure the tree and then input some information and provide what are the ecological benefits of the tree, from air, CO2 sequester, water, all this kind of stuff. And then we actually put, and the output of this app is an actual label, like the USDA labels. So what we did in the beginning was create those big labels for certain trees that we knew, and then have the kids do their own and validate this information. So it's just a simple way of bringing citizen science, engaging kids, engaging the parents, because the parents will be there and we're like, oh, how do I do this? And engaging, even if you have ability to bring scientists or managers that are trying to bring this type of information for the decision making. Scavenger hunts, bird watching, again, meet the scientists. We are true believers of inspiring the new generations and young generations. So sometimes meeting the scientist, meeting an entomologist or whatever, or arborist, it always brings that opportunity. What can you do? Outdoor interpretation, career pathways. We recommend project learning. Project learning, for those who don't know it, it provides very, very good curriculum on conservation education. So all of these are things that you can do. Wellness, forest therapy, or forest bathing, movement class, yoga, Zumba, dance classes outdoors. You're probably familiar with walk with the dog or park RX. So what are these activities that you can bring recreational? You know, all of this hiking, picnicking, and then combining them. Like, hey, you can have a Zumba instructor and a citizen science event, and while others are doing some biking. I mean, it's how do we make sure that we are attracting and bringing every level of interest and level of outdoor confidence into your activities. Again, river snorkeling, entertainment. We love the dance, and we actually have done for last year's National Public Lands Day. We helped co-produce the signature event where we recorded, taped artists in different public lands around the nation, and we dub it as a online road trip for public lands with music. So music culture, it's always a really good element. Quick check, Nick or Tara, are there any questions or any comments that I should?
Hi, Felipe. Yeah, we do have a question from somebody. They were asking, do you know if iNaturalist is available in other languages? And also, how important is bilingual support in your most successful events and/or activations?
Absolutely. iNaturalist is available in Spanish, at least, and in many others. So, and I also see this one about the label. That app is iTree. iTree. So and it's very simple. You can do it on your computer. It doesn't need to download any specific. And yes, keys have bilingual. Sometimes you don't need the expert. Like if you're bringing a scientist or or somebody making a presentation, necessarily to that person be fluent in Spanish, but interpretation. And the issue is that families, like usually the younger kids will probably be fluent in English, or the youth or those who were they were born in the US, they will probably be fluent. And recent immigrants like myself would prefer sometimes Spanish. So it is best to have that ability and to have somebody that could interpret. You don't need necessarily that all your staff is bilingual, that everything is. And if in any case you don't have that, because sometimes it happens, you could always have the instructions printed in Spanish, and they can follow along, and they'll figure out. I mean, it's part of the it's part of living in the United States. You figure it out. So provide resources, provide content, provide somebody that can help, and promote the helping each other, building community. Somebody might like, oh, I can translate for that, or like maybe the kids are doing it. So just be mindful. And if that's the case, then you will have to speak. If you have to, you're giving instructions or doing a presentation, you have to be slower because you'll need the time for interpretation. So make those considerations. Again, there's not a general rule, but just keep that when you're thinking and when you're designing. Communications, again, flyers, social media, website. Make sure that everything that you post, that you put out, it's uh, available on for mobile devices, because that's how Latino communities access this information. If you are wanting to go to them and go to the websites, they're not going to do it. So make it simple. Make it. Don't expect necessarily that they will sign up with Eventbrite or anything. It doesn't happen. We've tried many ways. We done many. It doesn't work. Those who say they're gonna, they didn't show up, and then you got many others. So just be flexible. The best and the most important way to bring people is word of mouth. If somebody has a good experience or likes it, or somebody in trust, they will share that information. But make sure that you provide those elements when you're doing this, your outreach. At the event, again, the be inclusive. Welcome everybody. Welcome the family. Find this is a great recommendation. I believe Cam said, find a good MC. MC can be the key of a good or a bad experience for everybody. Like if somebody that will do and play and be playful and make those considerations and understand the culture, it's going to be somebody from their own community that you can empower, or some of the organizations that you may be bringing. So a great MC is important. Bilingual programming, as I mentioned, cultural awareness, simple instructions and messaging, make people feel safe, be aware of sensitivities. And I know that this is not only with Latino communities, but with many others. It's distrusting uniforms. I mean, most of the park service, park rangers, forest rangers, they look like law enforcement or immigration enforcement. So be aware of those and help bring down those barriers. Make sure that they feel safe, that they feel that they trust what they're doing. In some occasions, we recommend to you for our partners in the agencies to try to use the polo. I mean, have the logo. I mean, depends on the situation and depends obviously on the particularities of their community. But this is real, and again, not only for Latino communities, but the distrust of uniforms is real, and it's important to address. Have fun. Have a call to action at the end. And National Public Lands Day obviously gives you a perfect call to action. Protect our public lands. Protect our mother nature. Honor our Madre Tierra. Be inspired by our ancestors in protecting our Mother Earth. These are elements, these are calls to action that will resonate and will make, if you do it right, I guarantee you that folks will be bring back, and not only be back, they will bring family, friends, and it will grow. And that's, but again, it's a process. It takes time. It takes testing, takes trial and error, but it is worth doing, and we really encourage you to do it. Again, just a sample run of show. We like introductions, safety instructions, stream introductions, who's in charge, who ask, where are the facilities, whatever it is. Then we break the ice. We put some music, some dance, do the activities, start wrapping up with a call to action, and then come together as a community, whether it's food, whether it's a reflection, whether it's just having a conversation among each other. And then an important thing that we always bring is clean up together. It's also part of community building. It's also part of the core responsibility and co-management and being good stewards of the land. So this is a typical run of show that we will have, with each of these elements being equally important. Incorporating traditions. In past webinars, we've been asked, hey, a land acknowledgement or having an Aztec ensemble or a ceremony. We always said, like, yes, it's important. If you are able to do it right. Do your homework. That's the most important. What are groups that have this expertise in your area? How to make it really an integral part and not just an add-on or like a check or checking a box. Allow time. Do it in a respectful and organic way. Invite local groups to co-create the experience. This is key. And obviously provide explanations for the general public, because whatever you may be doing, with regular visitors might be interested or maybe like or react positive or negative to what's happening. So just make sure that you provide information for those who are observing from the outside. And this is something that Cam always emphasizes, and prepare for the next adventure. Like once you do the first one, what are we doing for the next one? How are we going to motivate the youth, to motivate the leaders, to motivate the families to do? Do we need to start acquiring equipment or backpacks, or can we find ways to provide scholarship or stipends to do this? If we want to sustain that, we want to create ambassadors out of the families that we're engaging, be thinking forward and know that there's going to be resources needed, but I think these resources can be found, can be acquired, and it's one of the best investments that you can do. And I know Cam has a lot of great experience creating this like a bodega, a cache of equipment that it can be borrowed and used by communities, by youth, but make sure that you're thinking forward. Key dates, again, obviously National Public Lands Day, but there's other throughout the year, other key dates that you can leverage on the work that you're doing. And that's it. I'm finished 5 minutes before time. It's the first. Here's my email, my number if you need me, and I'm gonna put also Cam's. Unfortunately, because of technical, we couldn't get a lot of his experience, wisdom, and insights, but I hope I was
Felipe, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I added a lot in the chat as you were going, so there's definitely some suggestions in there. And of course, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to email me.
Fantastic. So as he mentioned, there's a lot in the chat, and feel free to reach out to both of us, either or. We'll be more than happy to help to support. That's it from our end. Nick, do we have time for a couple of questions if there are any?
Yeah, if anybody does have any Q&A, please feel free to type, and we can have the experts answer. And thank you, Felipe, for your expertise on this. I definitely learned a lot. Sorry, Cam, that your internet was not available out in the wilderness, but it's very understandable. Thank you for being available to everybody to answer the questions.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it looks like there are no Q&A.
All right. So we'll give you 4 minutes back of your time.
Yeah, and thank you again very much, and thank you to all the attendees. We hope to see you at our next Nature for All webinar next Wednesday with Disabled and Outdoors. Until then, everybody enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you very much, Nick, and thank you for NEEF for having us.